I have an extra copy.
Do you have an extra
I do.
copy? You're wonderful, Lisa. I can always count on you. I'm going to pull it up on my laptop if needed. But so have you guys started the review?
Yes.
A few. Lisa has. Kenneth, have you started the review? You looked at it. That's a start. Thank you.
Looking at it counts.
I printed it, kind of thing, right? Okay, so, and I did make sure this one wasn't, because I created this one, that it wasn't quite as overwhelming. You know, some of those others were like 90 questions.
Yeah.
These are some kind of long, intensive questions. Your exam is actually going to be only 12 questions. Typically, they were 14. I cut it down to 12. They're long. Even with the 12, it took me 20 minutes to write the key, the answer key. Which, so I'll try to give you guys a full hour to take the test. So instead of like the 50 minutes. But yeah, just, you're going to want to work fairly quickly. So don't, when you get stuck on a problem, write all that you can about it, move on to the next, and then if you have time, go back to it. All right. Should we get started? So those of you guys who've looked at it, do you have any specific questions that you want to go over?
I didn't see what they were asking, so I was trying to solve when I looked at the answer, and the rest was just like
And what did it say?
write the word or phrase.
Best complete your statement. That doesn't seem to make sense with that question, huh?
Yeah. So I know-
Yeah. Sorry, I had the computer throw these together, so.
It's just the.
Yeah, so all I wanted to do was write the equation for it. I won't give you one that easy on the test, so you can just skip that. Okay. So yeah, number 5, go ahead and just skip. But just know how to write it from matrix form into equation form. I mean, that should be hopefully easy. Yeah, that one is poorly written as far as the instructions go. Okay, anything else? You guys are just like, just pick, right? Just move forward. So number 1, you'll definitely have a question on at least one from every section. Okay. So number 1 is your parabola type question. So let's at least go through that. Number 1 is a fairly simple parabola question. Okay. So we've got y squared equals 5x. And all they wanted you to do on this question is graph it. I may be a little more specific. I may ask you to graph, what information can you graph from a parabola?
The direction it's opening, where its vertex is.
Okay, so vertex, so the graph would show the direction, right? But I may ask specifically for the vertex.
Focus, directrix.
Yeah, and how many foci do you have?
1.
One, because it's a parabola, right? So I could ask for the focus, and I could ask for the directrix. And are the focus and the directrix, how are they related?
Distance from the vertex.
So
in and out.
they are the same distance, right? From the vertex. And what did we call that distance?
A.
A. Okay, so with the ellipse and the hyperbola, we also had an A, and it was the distance to the vertex, right? A was the distance to the vertex as well. So those three parts are all similar. A is always the distance to the vertex, except for with the hyperbola and the ellipse, it was the distance from the center, okay? And we don't necessarily have a center, right? Let's see. Oh, no, that wasn't, sorry, I want to say the vertex, it's from the vertex to the focus, right, would be A. And then on hyperbola and ellipse, A would be the distance from the center to the focus. Let me clarify that, okay? All right, so what do we know? So I'm going to ask her all that information, even though the question only asks you to graph it. So what information can you pull from here?
2 Y's for every X.
2 Y's for every X, okay? What does that mean?
Sideways.
Opening right or left?
Right? Okay, because there's 2 Y's for every X. So if I pick an X value, I would have 2 Y's associated with it. Okay, so you know it's a sideways parabola. Now, how do I know whether it's facing to the right or facing to the left?
Positive or negative?
Positive or negative coefficient, right? So it's going to be positive or negative. Because it's positive, it would be facing right. So this is if it's negative, then it's facing the left. Okay? So I know that it's facing right. What else do I know?
It's vertex,
How do you know it's vertex?
because it's assumed what, +0.
Yeah, because it fits the form, and you actually will have on this exam, okay, I will give you a page of all those equations for a parabola and an ellipse and a hyperbola, okay? So on your page you'll have y, it won't write it this way, but it'll write y minus k squared equals 4a times x minus h, right? And you'll have a +1 and a -1. And then you could have x minus h squared equals ±4a y minus k, right? Those are the parabola options, and hopefully you guys know the difference in equations for parabola, hyperbola, and ellipse. So on this one, the vertex is the HK, which is like your center on the others. Okay, so because you aren't subtracting anything, you know that the center, or the, sorry, to make sure I use the right word, the vertex is at
0, 0.
0, 0. Because you have nothing that you're subtracting from the H, from the Y or the X. Okay, so we know the vertex is at 0, 0. How could I find the focus? So at this point, so far, I could put my vertex at 0, 0, and I know it's right facing. Okay, and you could pick some points, right, to get some values. So like if I picked a 1, you could throw 1 in there, and then you'd get, so if I'm just thinking, I don't know, I just want to, particularly if it was a multiple choice, I just want to know how high up, right, out of my options. You could put in a 1, and then y would be the square root of 5, right? And you could pick a 2, actually it'd be plus or minus square root of 5, because we should have 2 y values for every x. And then I could pick a 2, and that would be 10, and then I'd get plus or minus square root of 10, and you could, you know, come up with the approximations for those. This is like 3.1. What's square root of 5? Is that 2.2?
2.2. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is about 3.1.
Yes.
Please do.
Yeah, so at 2.2, I'm sorry, at 1 you would be up at 2.2, right? Or negative 2.2. And then at 2 you could be up at 3.1 and negative 3.1. Okay? So you could plot some points there. But again, how would I find where the focus is?
C, like the actual C, so it's like the same distance from the foci
C squared,
There's no C
no,
in a parabola.
that's the,
Oh, is there B then? No.
No, there's no B, there's only an A.
Well, I just know, well, isn't the focus just automatically one from the
Mm-mm.
vertex?
No. So look at your options for the equations up here. Do you see A in it?
Yes.
Okay, so how can I find out what A is?
leading coefficient, so it'd be something times something equals the number.
So if I were to make this, and this is this form, not this form, because it has the y squared, right? But basically this, the coefficient, is that, right? Okay, so what I'm saying is 4a has to be equal to 5, because the coefficient was a 5. And the coefficient comes from 4a, 4 times a. Does that make sense? And remember, this will be given to you, you just have to know what to do with it.
Okay.
Okay, so that 4 times a is always equal to your coefficient. Okay, so 4a equals 5, so a equals
5/4.
5/4, okay, which would be 1 1/4. So what would you do with 1 1/4?
Move it from the vertex.
Yeah, from the
Inside.
vertex, remember? A is the distance from the vertex to the focus and to the directrix. So from your vertex, you would go
Inside the parabola.
inside the parabola, because your focus is always inside the parabola. So you would go 1 1/4, and that's where your focus would be. Okay, if I were to describe that as an ordered pair, it would be 1 1/4, comma,
0.
0. Does that make sense? Okay, and then if I said, give me the equation for the directrix and draw it as well, where's my directrix?
Same
X equals
distance.
negative 5/4.
So you would go to negative 1 1/4, right? Because you would subtract the distance, okay, from, actually I'll just draw it as a solid line so it doesn't look like an asymptote. So I would have y equals negative 5/4.
X equals negative.
Thank you. X equals negative 5/4 because it is a vertical line, right? At negative 5/4. So that would be the complete picture for the parabola.
Would we have to plug in the focus and solve for the lattice rectum?
You might, so let's go ahead and do that. So if you wanted the lattice rectum, the end points of the lattice rectum, okay? So the lattice rectum would go through the focus. Okay, so this is my lattice rectum. So I want to know what is that ordered pair and what is that ordered pair. You'll know half of it, and all we need to do is figure out the other half. So if I said, what is that ordered pair, do you know the x or the y value for it?
X.
The x, because it goes through the focus, and so therefore the x value for the ordered pair won't change. So it'll be 5/4, comma, right? And then this one will be 5/4, comma. Okay? So we'll have two potential y values for the one given x value, because that's what it says here. 2 y's for every x. So how would you find the value there? Kenneth, what do you say?
Plug it in.
Plug it in. So you have an equation that associates x and y's. And so if I know that x is equal to 5/4, then what I would do is say y squared must be 5 times 5/4. That makes sense? Okay, so then you just solve that equation. So y squared equals 25/4. So how do I get y?
Take a square root.
Square root. So I'm gonna, when I take the square root, I end up with 2 values, plus or minus the square root of 25/4, which of course,
5/2.
yeah, works out very nice. So 5/2, which would be 2 1/2. which I can see from here, yes. On my graph, it looks like about 2.5.
On our graph, it's like the same as like if we chose the points for x to 2, it would be like the square root of 10. Like that's how it shows in my graph, like that's where like if I was to draw that line.
Right, your lattice rectum, if it's a lattice rectum in particular, it has to go through the focus. It can't be just a random point like we picked over here. It has to be at 5 fours. What do you get? Because that is the focus.
Okay.
So it has to go through, by definition, a lattice rectum has to go through the focus. So you had to find what value of x is the focus. And then plug that in, and that's where you get the 5/2, or exactly 2.5. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so that is all the different pieces of information that I could ask you then on a parabola. Okay, the big key, it sounds like, that you guys have forgotten is how to find A. Okay, and that's from the coefficient, right? Just set it equal to 4A. And how to find the endpoints for the lattice rectum. Okay, and that's just once you find what A is, you know, that tells you where your lattice rectum is, and then you plug that back in to the original equation to get to your endpoints. Okay. All right, questions on that one? Okay, so let's find one for 7.3, an ellipse. Does it have one on there?
20, I think.
Parabola, another parabola one.
25.
25, yep, or 26, right? Or 27. So 25 through 27.
27.
Okay, which one of those looks the harder? And we'll do all the information from it as well. Let's do number 25. Well, is there one that has to complete the square? We'll complete the square on the hyperbola. So let's do, let's go ahead and do number 25. And we'll find all the information from it. Okay? So 25.
29 is a hyperbola.
This is an ellipse question. So we've got 36, x plus 1 squared plus 25, y minus 1 squared equals 900. Okay, to find, what's the general equation for an ellipse?
X squared over something, or over a squared, and then y squared over b squared is equal to 1.
Yeah, so we have two options, except for it wouldn't even just be x squared, like, because I can end up shifting it, right? So on your formula sheet, it won't just have x squareds and y squareds. It's going to put it with the h and k, right? So you could have x minus h squared, and is it plus or minus when you deal with an ellipse?
Minus.
Plus, right? Plus, okay? So ellipses are added and
Minus is hyperbola.
hyperbolas are
Minus.
subtraction, by definition. Okay, to form an ellipse, that's the adding the distances, and hyperbolas is subtracting the distances, okay? So we've got x minus h squared, and then y minus k squared equals 1, right? And then which one's a and which one's b?
X is A.
A is bigger than B, so.
A.
Okay, so I've got it on the board over there, but a is always greater than b. So you put the a under the major axis. Okay, so that a is always bigger, and we always put it under the one that ends up the major one, okay? So in this case, we don't know what a is yet, but once we find it, then I'll know, okay? Because we'll know a is always bigger than b. and it's under the major axis. So if I said solve this, or basically get this in this form, what's the first thing that you should do?
Divide by 900.
Divide by the 900, because both the hyperbola and the ellipse we set equal to 1. Okay, so we're going to divide by the 900 so that I can get it in this form. And reduce those fractions. And all of the options that we're going to give to you will not have a coefficient. In other words, this fraction, 36/900ths, will reduce. Okay, so that it only has a denominator and the numerator will be a 1. Okay, so take your fraction calculator, reduce
First
36.
one's 25.
25 and
the next
36.
one's 36.
The first one's 25, and the next one's
36.
36. That worked out nice because those are both perfect squares, right? Okay, so now I ask myself maybe which one's A and which one's B.
A is 1, or 36.
Okay, so this would be the A squared and this would be the
B squared.
B squared. And again, that's because A is always bigger than B. Okay? The other way you can think about this is you can actually graph this from just that information. Okay? So if I were to graph it, what you would do is go, the X is stretched out how far? But basically, where's your center first? Let's do that.
It's a negative 1 and 1. Sorry.
That's okay. Negative 1, 1. Everyone see where that comes from? Okay, that's your H and K. So you go negative 1 and up 1. So we draw my center, and then from the center, what's under the X tells you how far to stretch it out X way. Okay, so I would stretch it out how far? 5. Okay, because this is 5 squared. So you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then how far would you stretch it along the Y?
6.
Make sure that's a little closer there. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So is it more elongated along the X, or is it more elongated along the Y, or the X?
Why?
It's Y, okay? And that's why A is 6, because it's how it's elongated, because that tells you how it's elongated is the major axis. Okay, so even though this one does almost look like it's a circle, it's slightly more elongated along the Y, okay? So this one is your major axis. Okay, so you can actually draw the ellipse from there. Remember, always start from the center, not 0, 0, though, when you go X and Y's, or A's and B's, I should say. All right, so from there, what other information could we pick out?
Well, we know our vertices.
Okay, how do we know the vertices?
Well, because A